You're working under extreme pressure in London.
I like to get out into the countryside.
I don't want to live where I work.
Used to leave about 6:30 in the morning and get home about 7:30.
It's nice to be able to come home, relax, get off the train, you smell the sea air and you think, ah.
I like to go back and do my shopping on a Saturday morning up to town.
It's a nice area where I live, and that's where I want to be.
Every working day, almost 500,000 commuters pass through London's train stations. Few ever stop their daydreaming to consider the extraordinary machine that makes their lifestyle possible. But London's railways were not built for commuters.
In the beginning, the whole system operated by steam. There would be smoke and particles of dirt coming through the window, so that you would make sure that if you wanted the window down, you would sit back to engine rather than facing the direction of motion.
But a few specks of soot was a small price to pay to get out of filthy and overcrowded central London.
I moved from the eastern side of London to the far west of the London region, to the limits of the old county of Middlesex. It meant travelling from Baker Street or Great Portland Street to Willesden Green, to Wembley, to Harrow-on-the-Hill.
And so on down the Metropolitan Line, a railway with remarkable ambitions. In the mid-19th century railway boom, the Met was part of a grand plan to link Birmingham, London, and through a tunnel, Paris. Sadly, the Met never reached Paris, but it did link London with the countryside.
And I alighted at Eastcote Station, which is one of the little hamlets to the east of Ruislip,
where Len Street found a new community being pioneered.
Londoners played, worked and travelled. It was the age of Metroland.
Metroland was the collection of commuter towns that sprang up along the old Met Railway. By the 20s, suburbia had been created. For its residents, it seemed to offer a better way of life. For the Met, it meant radical modernisation. Having laid power rails along its line, the Met built fleets of electric locomotives. This is the only survivor of the most successful fleet, introduced in 1922.
Don't suppose there's many Met drivers now, Met drivers, that actually drove these in service. I mean, I'm getting on to 77.
The last time Don Batchelor piloted an electric loco was almost 40 years ago.
Well, this is your controller, and you put your key in there. Right, that's the first notch. That's in series. Build it up. They were slow off the mark because you were pulling 6 coaches behind them, which was dead weight, nothing pushing. Then we put it over into full. That's full parallel. That's off. And it feels lovely. Though I wish I was back on it again now. Oh dear. And their top speed, I suppose you, on the downhill from Finchley Road to Wembley, on the down gradient, you could get round about the 60 mark.
The trouble was that getting them up to 60 was the easy part.
They were difficult to stop in exactly the right place. Oh yes, yeah. I mean, you've got to think of the weight behind you and the system on the track, the greasy valves, all those things come into it. You didn't overshoot naturally when you run into Baker Street, number 1 or 4 platform, because it's a dead end.
And dead ends were not the only danger.
On these, it's all 630 volt circuits, and even your lights are all the same. And that's why we used to have hats with insulated inside, so you could pull your mains out and you change the fuses and that with using your hat. On this particular day, I grabbed hold of this mains here and my finger touched that. Oh, blowed, and because down I went and I came round a bit and I could smell burning. I felt my hair, I thought it burnt my hair off, but it nasty burns, all blister up here. That was on Sarah Siddons and all this particular loco, so I'm very pleased with that.
These locos were technological pioneers, but they had limits, because until 1962 the Met's electric power rail ended at Rickmansworth. Trains that arrived from the distant suburbia beyond here were steam-hauled. But the commuters still got to town without leaving their carriage.
Steam locomotive went forward into a siding. While that was happening, the electric locomotive was moving out of its siding back onto the London-bound train, hitched up, and the train was away. And in 4 minutes, that operation was completed. It was an incredible feat of manpower, I can tell you.
You've got to drop down right next to the steam engine to put your jumpers in, and every time you do that, the firemen used to let the water out of the ejectors, and they used to get soaking wet. Yeah, oh, they always cursing him there, that was, yeah.
The Rickmansworth or Ricky changeover allowed a commuter to compare steam power with electricity.
The steam locomotive, generally in those days anyway, had a slow rate of acceleration. But with the electrics, it was quite remarkable, the speed of getaway from a standing start.
But on the other side of London, at Liverpool Street, steam ruled. This was a mainline station for the vast LNER, but it had also been a route to suburbia for a generation and had handled over 65 million commuters a year by the turn of the century. Because this service predated affordable electric trains, the LNER had been forced to make steam work.
The electric service was no faster than steam. Steam could turn round in 3 minutes at Liverpool Street. 3 minutes for an engine to uncouple, stick a pipe in, people to get in, doors to shut, guard to walk up the other end, change ends of his train, and then wait for the road, engine to and come on the other end, couple up, get right away, gone.
During the 20s, the rural Lee Valley, northeast of London, was turned into a suburban paradise. And the steam train service that made this happen became a local hero. It even had a nickname.
In the early days, when they first started it, they had yellow and red and blue colours painted on the carriage sides over the doors. This would tell passengers which was first, second and third class. And the colours being rather bright were called jazzy, so hence the jazz was developed.
On the jazz, green meant ladies only. It was an old-fashioned world.
My mother said you should travel in the ladies only, much safer, which I did. And there was this rather formidable team of ladies in the compartment, old secretaries, of which I am now one of. But, I mean, they looked at you, didn't they? Just looked at you.
Yeah.
And you sat there, and if you got in before they did and happened to take one of their seats, well, nothing was ever said.
Glared at you, glared at you.
You were doomed.
It was a lovely service, it was. It was a good work, it was interesting work, it was hard work, I mean, there was no let-up. You did 5 rounders at Liverpool Street, Enfield, back to Liverpool Street, back to Chingford, back to Liverpool Street. You kept going.
I mean, everybody worked in the city in those days.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
there was a crowd of us, wasn't there?
Oh, it was our crowd. Yeah.
yes.
We filled up one of these compartments quite easily, and we had quite a little club, really.
Yeah.
And we made a lot of friends.
And you didn't ask them their names in those days, and if you did, they would say Mister. And so we nicknamed everyone, didn't we? There was Russian Spy.
Russian Spy. He was foreign.
The compartments were 10 to a carriage, 10 carriages, 6 each side, and 6 standing. That was a lot of people.
And then there was the Major, I don't remember.
Yeah, the Major worked for the Corps of Commissionaires.
Yes.
The Jazz was hauled by a specially designed loco. It was called the N7.
They were first introduced in 1914, and 135 of them were built to run the services. And the crews loved them. They were good, comfortable, clean, good riding engines, free steamers, economical. They're a nice machine all round.
The N7 was straightforward. 6 small driving wheels and great power from a compact boiler.
It takes you back years, it does, because she's just as I remember them. I mean, they were a lovely engine. They were always boss of the job.
By 1930, London had almost 1 million commuters. Without this workforce flooding in from suburbia, the city would have ground to a halt. From now on, the humble commuter train would be essential to London's survival.
The new Clio Versailles is a palace on wheels. From just $7,895 on the road, it has a tilt and slide sunroof, stereo radio cassette, and 1 year's free insurance. All the standard, and for just £50 extra, I bought this. Not bad, eh? Look at that. The new Clio Versailles. Good thinking, Renault.
This overnight service from the UK really knocks me out.
Millie, the stripes.
Clients just change their mind.
It's purple!
Overnight.
I got travel insurance from the post office back home. I got it while I was picking up my traveller's checks, so I'm fully covered.
I grow pineapples. I turn them into chunks. I sell them all over Europe. As for my invoices, I get the Royal Mail to send them from London to all my customers in one big chunk.
The post office, winning people over all over the world.
Look at his little face. Nature, Jeff. Isn't it wonderful?
Yes, love.
You can almost reach out and touch them. Yes, come on then, come on.
Broken or chipped windscreen? Just call Autoglass. We'll come to you and fix it on the spot, wherever you are. In fact, we'll take care of everything, even your insurance company.
Sometimes they look so human.
For car glass, automatically think Autoglass.
I suppose I just got used to the noise at work. Didn't really bother me. Now it's all I ever hear. I feel like I'm in a world of my own.
We're going for a pint. Come on, get your stuff together.
Millions of people could have their health and their lives ruined by work. Employers could ease this unnecessary suffering by calling for a free HSE Good Health is Good Business Employer's Guide on 0345 181819.
From the makers of In the Name of the Father.
A man was shot, but he was a soldier. He was somebody's son like you're mine.
Sometimes the only thing worth fighting for.
You're talking about a hunger strike.
Is the love of a mother for her son.
You must not do this, did you hear me?
I love you. Helen Mirren, Some Mother's Son.
Steady. Right, let's be...
Marvellous. 3 laps ahead.
You've got to get off to a good start, Henry. Take your finances. It pays to get a good team behind you. Like those Equitable Life chaps. They see to it that you get more pounds working for you from day one. Not planning properly for the future can really hit you where it hurts. And we don't want to leave ourselves open to that, do we, Henry?
With more pounds working for you from day one, it's an equitable life, Henry.
The Metropolitan Line was once a role model for London's commuter railways. Then, in 1933, it was absorbed by the London Underground, and its trains have since become more and more like tubes. Old Met drivers called tube trains tin cans, and it's hard to imagine these 30-year-old A60s inspiring social change. But mass transit has changed Londoners' lives. This is a garden on the Becontree estate at London's eastern edge. In the 1930s, Becontree was the world's largest housing estate and offered the dream of suburbia, even to the poor, like Phoebe Kirk and her family.
We were living in Islington in 2 semi-basement rooms.
Then Phoebe's baby son David got pneumonia and was dying in the Victorian slums.
The hospital got in touch with Dagenham and they found us a place, found us a cell. We came down here October the 1st, 1931. Felt a different world, different altogether. Own toilet, own everything. You could make your own rules, do what you wanted. Like heaven, a fairyland.
Becontree existed because it lay on the railway between Southend and Fenchurch Street. And for under a shilling, a workman could commute into the city, as Phoebe's husband Alfred did.
When we came down here, he gave up smoking to pay the fare because money was very sparse in those days.
The East was traditionally the poorer side of London, and life here was always a struggle for economic survival. But local commuters like Barry Flaxman believed there was no excuse for late trains.
The line came to Southend-on-Sea, just up the road here, in 1856. It's been neglected from every point of view, from a financial, from a rolling stock, from a locomotive point of view, and until very, very recently, it's been neglected from a management point of view.
The neglect began in the depressed 1930s, when the line's owners, the huge LMS conglomerate, broke a promise made to the Southend Corporation to electrify.
LMS did nothing right the way through until 1933, when it was decided, the corporation decided they would really put on every form of legal pressure they could, and the LMS said, right, we'll build you 37 special locomotives for the line.
The locos were filmed by Peter Peyton, who commuted behind them. He was a train spotter, and so he noticed that these locos were rather special.
The locomotives, of which 2500 was the first one, I would regard as possibly the finest suburban tank engines ever ran in this country. They could move 300 to 400 ton trains, reach maximum speeds of, if pushed a bit, between 80 and 90 miles an hour. I timed one at a speed of 83. They could accelerate, say, with a 350 ton train, from a standing start at a place like Upminster to 34 miles an hour in the first minute, and up to, say, 44 miles an hour in the second minute.
Not exactly hair-raising, but fast for a steam train, because while most locos had just 2 cylinders, one on each side, the 2500 type was built like an express, with an extra 3rd cylinder in the middle.
The 3-cylinder arrangement gives almost a perfect power per revolution of the wheel. When you've got a 2-cylinder, you've got a little bit of unevenness which will throw an engine into a slip. But these type of engine will work a train of 11 coaches out of a station on a wet rail, possibly without any slip at all, quicker than an electric train.
But the LMS was competing against a rival route to Southend.
All change here for electricity. Steam played its part for years on this line, but it could not meet modern demands for faster, cleaner service, economical working, and more trains. For many years, smoke and steam hung over the trees and fields between Shenfield and Prittlewell. But now the clouds are clearing. The copper wire cable is ready to carry electric power from the new substations.
In 1945, London's commuter railways were in a terrible war-torn state. But the new nationalised industry, British Railways, soon began reconstruction and electrification. The XLN line, running from Southend to Liverpool Street, was one of the first to get power cables. And by 1949, it already had a new electric train, the 306.
In comparison to what the people used to run on, these things were a breath of fresh air. Power-operated sliding doors, light and airy full-length compartments, luggage racks. It couldn't seat that many people. The total number of people on this three-coach train was only around about 166, and there was about 40 or 64 people in this compartment. But it was built for mass transit because you had the strap hangers for people to hang on to. Of course, as time went on, these became a bit dated, but the people used to still stand and wait for these rather than some of the newer stock because of the comfortable seating. The old bouncy seats, all sprung cushions.
The 306 could accelerate from 0 to 60 in under 90 seconds and was much quicker than the steamers on the old LMS route.
If you stood at one end of the vehicle and looked down here and it was doing full speed of about 65, 70 miles an hour, the sight of about, I don't know what we got here, about 60 odd people all bouncing in unison was quite hilarious to see them all bouncing from side to side as one. It's quite funny.
With the electrification, you could safely sit down in a carriage and get out without having to sort of send your suit to the cleaners, which one had to do quite frequently on a steam train.
And white shirts got absolutely filthy.
Absolutely
Cuffs
filthy.
were filthy, and collars.
Cuffs and collars would continue to get filthy on the old steam LMS route between Southend and Fenchurch Street because it had not been electrified after nationalisation. In fact, it had become BR's misery line.
Well, it was extremely poor, and of course people expected so much more. The war having been over, they expected the return of locomotives that would do the job, better rolling stock from somewhere, and that generally there would be some management attention given to a very important commuter line. In fact, this never materialised. I was lucky enough to live right overlooking the line, and being a student I had a fair amount of spare time, so I kept very accurate records of what was happening. The origin of the train either at Fenchurch Street, Tilbury or Shoebury. Perhaps we better now just wait for the 1340 out on its way to Shoebury. Then I entered how late it was running against the schedule. Here we are in August, trains running 20 late, 10 late, 34, 27, 19, 19, 21, 18 late, 31 and so on and so on. So I started writing letters to the press. Mr. Henry Channon MP, the Council and the Railway Travellers Association should immediately combine to apply pressure on the apathetic railway company. It's the obvious solution to the present disgraceful situation. Yours sincerely, Barry K. Flaxman. And I believe that the letters which I was putting in the press at around about the age of 18 didn't read quite as if they were from somebody of my age, rather of an old disgruntled gentleman, perhaps in his 50s or 60s. And finally the mayor and town clerk said, well, you better come along with us to the railway executive and express your views and tell him how to do it better.
Barry Flaxman devised a new timetable so that fast trains weren't stuck behind slow ones, and trains no longer detoured beyond Southend to get their windows shut. It worked until 1961, when electricity finally reached the misery line. The spearhead of electricity looked old-fashioned, with its slammed doors and compartments, but these 302s reduced the journey time from Southend to Fenchurch Street by up to 25 minutes. And the timetables changed again, so commuters could make all sorts of new connections.
First day of the electrification, we all travelled up together, and I think it was probably about the second or third day. A friend of mine who used to join us at Lee was on Lee Station, and she met Tony on the station, who didn't travel with us at the time. And she said to him, "You travelling up on your own?" So he said, "Yes." So she said, "Well, come along and join the crowd in our carriage."
I got in and found there was a seat available, and of course going up on those trains, on the commuter trains, we used to pass the time very often, a number of us, by playing cards. And my first introduction to Chris was basically asking her to move from a corner seat so that I could sit opposite the chaps I was going to play with, meeting with a smart refusal. Well, one thing led to another, as you will appreciate, and we started going out together.
And we were married about a year later, and we've now been married 32 years.
No complaints, I'm forced to say that, of course, and 2 grown-up daughters.
The Hordens had both retired by 1980, but the 302s soldiered on. Then in 1996, BR's old Misery line was privatised. The new owners, the LTS and Railtrack, have invested millions in electronic signals and to replace the 40-year-old 302s. Another new era has begun in suburbia, but it will only last if the lessons of the past are remembered.